Thank you. Yes, my name is Jocelyn, and I'm a local. I grew up on a farm 15 miles north of town. I spent my whole life watching my father struggle to make a living off 120 acres, and I said, this is crazy that someone should work so hard to gain so little. I'm never going to do this. As soon as I turn 18, I'm out of here. And I went to school, and I got my chemistry degree. I went to University of Iowa. I got my master's in chemistry. And then I promptly went to Chicago, where I got a job as a research chemist. And I got married, and we bought a house, and things were going really well in Chicago. And my bosses were all talking very enthusiastically about my future as a company. And then one fall day, my husband and I went out and we visited a large vegetable farm north of Chicago. And there was something about that fall day, that beautiful farm, the land beneath my feet, the smell of the soil. There was something, but I was walking around and I was like, you know what, I belong here. This is where I really belong. And it was such a strong conviction that my husband and I, we were both chemists, we decided to move back to Iowa and try to make a go at the small family farm. So we sat down with my dad, and we were talking about our options. I mean, what do? We knew we couldn't make it on conventional corn and beans. We didn't have the acreage. There was just no way. And so we were talking over our options, and one thing my dad brought up was this thing called a CAFO, a confined animal feeding operation. They were kind of newer at the time, and some people were putting them in, and we were hearing it was a good way to make, good money without having a lot of land. It was a good way for young farmers to get their foot in the door. And we looked at it, and in the end, it just didn't feel right for all those poor little hogs to be squished in there, for me. And so we decided to go a completely different route, and we became organic herb farmers. We knew it was going to be incredibly challenging. We didn't have a model to follow. We didn't really know what we were doing. We had to do all our own marketing. We had to be both farmer and entrepreneur. But we knew that if we worked hard, if we had a good long-term plan, and if we just stuck with it and didn't give up, we thought we could really achieve our ultimate goal, which was to build this beautiful little destination farm that people from all over the Midwest would want to come see. We're going to have a little cafe. We're going to have herb gardens. We're going to have a store. And we were just going to be a model and an inspiration to young farmers everywhere, to come out and visit. And that was 12 years ago, and we've been going ever since, and we've been growing all this time, and so we've been organic all this time, and our farm feels really healthy and vibrant to me, very clean. Our workers, they really like being out there working with us. Our customers, they love to come visit the farm, and we just love being there. It's just this little slice of heaven that we get to live in and work on every day. And we've just been really happy for our success. And there's another success that I've been happy for as well, and that is we're surrounded by some large industrial agricultural farms. And I've been watching them expand and grow around me, and I've always been happy to see them do well, because I grew up in a farming community, and we all know in the farming community that it's incredibly hard to make a living on the farm. And so I want farmers to do well, and it makes me glad to see thriving farms. And so when the first CAFO went in, a mile down the road from our farm, I didn't really think much about it. I was like, it's something farmers got to do to make a living. We looked at it, there's money in it. And yeah, we could smell it from our farm, and it wasn't ideal, but at least it was a mile down the road. At least it was to the east. At least it was only the one building. And so, and it was owned by people who are not just farmers and neighbors, but church family and relatives, the kids in your 4-H club. So, we put up with it, and we didn't say anything about it. And I never thought to say anything about it until one evening when I was at my grandma's house, and Grandma actually lived just a quarter of a mile from this building. And she grew up during the Great Depression, so she would not run the air conditioning when she could just open a window. So it was a late summer evening, and we're sitting in her living room, and the windows were open, and you could smell the odor of hog manure in her living room. And it wasn't like the odor that I remembered from the pigs we had when I was growing up. It was much more like a sewer, and there were some unidentifiable chemical odors in there. And I just remember thinking, man, I didn't know hogs could really smell this bad. And then I sat there and I was looking at Grandma, who was this hardworking, God-fearing woman who was just the kindest woman, who would do anything for anyone, who was always baking a cake for someone. It just hit me that why does she deserve to spend her final years on earth like this, blanketed in the smell of hog crap in her own living room? But I still didn't say anything about it because there was sort of this mentality in my mind that it just wasn't my business, it wasn't my place to say anything. I just didn't be that one person to raise trouble, to really question this mecca of modern farming, the CAFO, and I didn't want to be that one neighbor who questions the actions of a fellow neighbor and farmer. And I didn't want to think there was anything to question. I didn't want to think that a fellow neighbor and farmer might do anything that might harm me or my family in any way. And so I wanted to be a good neighbor, and I wanted to believe that I was surrounded by good neighbors, and I never said anything. And then something happened. My grandma died. She caught a respiratory infection, and she went to the emergency room, and she never came home again. And so I kind of forgot about her in the CAFO until months later I ran into a friend who knew her and who she had really helped in a time of need. And they said to me, I can't believe you never said anything about that building. I can't believe you let your grandma live like that. And that's when I realized I wasn't the only one who had concerns about this building. And I started talking to people, and I figured out there's a lot of us around there who CAFOs go in next to us, and they negatively impact us. But we don't necessarily say anything because we're a close-knit, tied community, and we want to support our farmers, and we don't want to think that maybe anything is bad or harmful is going on in our community. Well, then something happened. I came across an article on the health effects of CAFOs. And I hadn't even really ever, even being a chemist, thought about the health effects before this article. And so since there was one just a mile down the road from me, I thought, I'm going to look into this. And being a research chemist, I wanted to see the hardcore validated scientific evidence. I wanted to see the real research behind it, so I went looking for it. And I found it. And what I found, what it said, it was clear, it was compelling, and what it says is hog manure from CAFOs. It's not like the manure of traditional hogs. It's got all these nasty chemicals in it that it's got viruses, bacteria, like, the superbugs in it. And there are also studies that are saying that it's in the air around CAFOs for miles. It's basically air pollution, and not only that, but this stuff that's in the air is being linked to health effects, real health effects in people. And one of those health effects is respiratory illness. And that finding hit me really hard because my grandmother had respiratory troubles in her last few years of life. And I remember when I read that study, I was like, oh, what was in that air that we were smelling? What was that in that air that we didn't know was there that she was breathing in? And then I started to think, what if I had been more concerned earlier? What if I'd read these studies earlier? What if I had said something? Could I have said something? Could I have done something that maybe would have made her last few, at least years on life easier by helping her to breathe easier? Could I maybe have done something to help prevent that respiratory illness that basically was the beginning of the end? Could I have done something to prolong her life, maybe, if I had known something, if I had done something, if I had acted? Was I so concerned with being a good neighbor that I turned out to be a terrible family member? These are questions that they're not ever going to get answered. And I'd really love to see my grandma again, but I can't do anything for her now. But you know what I can do is I can tell my story, and I can tell the truth. And the truth is we need to really think about our mentality in rural Iowa, and we really need to think about what we are doing to ourselves by being such good neighbors. But yeah. And we need to really question, none of us wants that. We all want to believe that we're one big community and that no one would do anything to harm anyone. And we don't want to think that a farmer maybe could do something that might harm us. We don't want to believe that. But my story goes on, and my story makes me think that what I want to believe does not really match reality. This summer, a couple neighbors started putting in 4 large CAFOs, all within a mile of our farm. 10,000 hogs going in almost overnight. The only alert we had about this was a letter from JFAN. And these buildings are going to greatly impact our life. We're going to smell them. We work out every day in our fields to raise our herbs. We're going to smell these buildings. We're going to be breathing in that polluted air. This is greatly going to impact our business. What about our dreams? Who's going to want to come visit an herb farm that's blanketed in the stench of 10,000 CAFO hogs? Nobody came and asked us how they might be harming us when they went to build these buildings. And when we did catch wind of it, when we said, hey, we have concerns about this, not only us, but other neighbors, we got no indication that anybody cared how they might harm us. And now my dad, my father, who has the biggest heart, who would do anything to help a friend, who was a good God-fearing, farm man, he lives in that house where my grandmother lived. And that house is no longer next to one CAFO, it's next to 3 CAFOs. And history is basically repeating itself. So let me tell you what I'm going to do differently this time. This time, I'm really going to be a good neighbor. And what that means is I'm going to speak up, and I'm going to urge others to speak up, and I'm going to keep speaking up, and I'm going to tell the truth, and I'm going to tell the truth as longly and sincerely and as clearly and plainly. Because for the sake of my grandma's memory and for the sake of my living father, for my own farm, for the people who work for me, for the other neighbors, for the sake of the CAFO owners themselves, who often live within the hazardous ratio, of this building, for the sake of everyone, I'm going to be a good neighbor. I'm going to speak up because being a good neighbor means speaking up. It means not minding your own business. It means doing what has to be done to protect those you love, to protect those around you. That's what being a good neighbor means, and I hope we will all be good neighbors now. Thank you.